Hello, it is Tara Boothby from Sojourn Psychology. I want to take some time to go over the butterfly hug and a few other varieties of tapping. And these are really great, simple strategies to use in times of distress, or when somebody might use the word anxiety. I'm having anxiety, I can't stop my thoughts, my heart is racing, I have a stomach ache. These are strategies that we can use as adults. These are strategies that we can teach to children. I use a variety of tapping with my own kids, and I use a variety of tapping for me and my unbelievably anxious, busy brain. So the butterfly hug, I do it and it works. The more you practice these tapping strategies, the better they're going to work for you. And by that I mean the more you practice versions of tapping, the faster you will be able to cool down your hot brain, that you will be able to bring down your heart rate, that your body will be able to rest and come into a place of de-escalation. Butterfly hug. So when I was first taught the butterfly hug, now I'm going to say that these strategies are all rooted in bilateral stimulation. So bilateral, we've got two hemispheres of the body. There's lots of research that shows that when we can increase connectivity through the two hemispheres, that it helps to bring down escalation inside of us. It's a way that we address trauma. It's a way that we address emotion. One way that we can increase or practice bilateral stimulation is walking or running. And if you are somebody who walks or runs, you will notice that you get to this point on your walk or your run, if you've been stressed, all of a sudden it's like, and some of that is the endorphins and what's going on in your brain, but also rooted in the bilateral stimulation. Our body has a design and it works. And when we know how to work with our body, we can help ourselves to overcome a variety of concerns. Butterfly hug. Butterfly hug is something that we often reference or teach in trauma work. Now, when I was first taught the butterfly hug, I was taught that this is the most common way that we see people doing it. There's nothing wrong with this, but there's more efficient ways. So this is something you might see on, sometimes they teach this for athletes or different things, on the shoulder. I guess this is the upper arm, or it could be up top. I have a microphone here, so I'm not going to tap up here. But this would be a more traditional method. Now, years ago, I took a training with well-known EMDR trauma expert, Katie O'Shea, and she actually said that there is a more efficient, truer form of the butterfly hug. And it's beautiful. This is a lovely one to teach to children, because what we're going to do is we cross our arms. So this is giving us additional bilateral stimulation. I'm going to be focusing on either sides of my hemisphere, but I'm also crossing over. And then you want to find your collarbone. So the bone here, and you just know that bony spot. This is in emotional freedom tapping. This is in a very important area as well. There's some pressure points here, and there's different methodologies that prove that this is a place that we can release tension. So it's a powerful resource when we are practicing bilateral stimulation on our collarbone. This is typically how I practice the butterfly hug. And already I do this so often, I can feel it immediately. Part of it is just my body doing what it's designed to do, how I can use my physical being to calm down my brain. And then also I have a neural pathway in my brain now, because I do this so much that my body knows, my brain knows, oh, Tara's taking care of us. And so my body trusts this process more efficiently. That's my neuropsychology explanation. A neuropsych person could say it better. However, through practice, we have increased ability to reap the benefits of some of these tapping techniques or other methods of self-regulation. So this would be the traditional butterfly hug. You can do it this way as well. And then I'm going to show you a couple varieties, because this looks freaking weird, right? You're not going to do this in public, but let's be honest. Most of the times when anxiety shows up, for me anyhow, it's in a public place or at the onset of bedtime. Now, a few weeks ago, months ago, I have no idea, I was in a situation where I felt completely safe, emotionally at rest, but my anxiety really became intense. And I wanted to do some de-escalation. I know my collarbone is a place that really works for me. That's where my body's trained the most. And what I chose to actually do in that moment was this, where I just with one hand, I felt comfortable in public to tap like this. Doesn't feel as efficient, but I still feel some of that bilateral stimulation. I'm still taking care of myself, working to de-escalate, and this was effective for me. I don't remember when it must have been 2008 when I first got trained in EMDR, and our trainer was a man who lived in Vancouver, and he worked with a lot of high up executives. And so when he would be doing EMDR and they needed some tools to cope with anxiety in their high, I don't know, fancy professional meetings, he taught them a different strategy. So you can see my knees here, is that a different way that we can do this is if we're sitting at a table, if it feels safe, emotionally safe and appropriate in public, this is another way that we can practice tapping. And for myself, I use this strategy from time to time, so I do feel a connection to it, my body trusts it, and it is another way to do the butterfly hug. And it's a way that people might not see or notice. And then a different thing, I'm not going to be able to show you this because you can't see my feet, but sometimes there's my feet, is I would just, even in my shoes, if I'm wearing closed-toed shoes, you can wiggle, moving your toes. Now, I don't think that's very efficient, but in the heat of a moment, if it's not feeling emotionally safe to do some tapping publicly, but anxiety showing up, that little tapping of the toe back and forth, if nothing else, it's grounding us and keeping us present. I don't love it, but it's something. I feel very present. I'm doing it just right now, and at least I'm very present with myself and my emotion, and hopefully that's going to keep me rooted in my body no matter what I'm facing, in the circumstances where I don't feel like this is the thing to do. And then at bedtime. So I think when my anxiety shows up at night, I'm in a long-term committed love relationship with my husband. We sleep in the same bed. And if I'm having intense anxiety, sometimes I feel embarrassed. There's embarrassment that comes along with escalation. That's normal. So if you feel embarrassed by some of your big feelings, I do too. And in bed, rather than tapping here, or tapping like this, long ago, I just started to tap on the sides of my legs like this. And because I trusted myself and it was my attempt at making myself feel safe, this very minimal version of the butterfly hug actually gives me some, even right now, this one works for me because I practiced it so much. And my body knows that I can trust this. This is my effort at de-escalation. Again, if nothing else, tapping is keeping us grounded. These are different varieties of the butterfly hug. Yeah, and I will say that if you want to get better and better at this very simple, amazing strategy, I would take some time whenever the big feelings show up to step away and do this version of the butterfly hug. Get your body really used to this one, and whatever variety works for you. And the other examples that I've shown. So if you're at work, you can shut your door. If you are out in public, you can excuse yourself and go to the washroom and shut the door, lock the door, and tap in there. We can always go sit in our car. There's always ways that we can just remove ourselves for 1 or 2 moments. I'm gonna take a sip of water. There's one other thing I wanna show you. Now, when I think about compulsive behaviors or trying to mitigate bad decisions, sometimes when we're driving home from work, that's where the triggers happen. I could just drive through McDonald's, I could pick up the wine, I could pick up the pot, I could go shopping, a variety of ways to self-medicate my anxiety through a compulsive choice, a compulsive behavior choice, and something that I don't want to do because I'm learning that it might be self-destructive for me. Overspending, drugs and alcohol, excessive food, all of those are varieties of compulsive behaviors. When we're driving, tapping on our body isn't necessarily an option. So what I find this really hard to do. It's just my brain has such a hard time. But when you're driving, if you put both hands on the steering wheel, this is another chance for some tapping where you could tap on the steering wheel like this. And with breathing, there's some tapping impact through the fingers. It's not as efficient, but if nothing else, I am at least grounding myself. If you feel safe to do so in such a circumstance as driving, road rage is showing up, or some anxiety, one hand on the steering wheel, we could do this type of tapping as well very easily. And I know it's safer to have both hands on the steering wheel, but most of us don't do it. I actually do. I'm a little nerdy and anxious, right? But if you are somebody who uses one hand on the steering wheel, this is actually something that you could do, as long as it's safe. So those are a few different varieties of the butterfly hug tapping. I also do the emotional freedom tapping, and I think I'll do another video on it. I just want to wrap my head around how I feel that would be a safe demonstration that people could implement on their own. I do have a lot of colleagues who have emotional freedom tapping videos, and it doesn't hurt to check those out. If tapping is something that you're curious about, or you try the butterfly hug and it works for you, then I would say look for some emotional freedom tapping videos. They work. This is interesting. Beyond helping to regulate emotion, or emotional freedom tapping is something that we can actually use to address trauma apart from EMDR. It's very interesting and efficient. But I used emotional freedom tapping to help my children potty train, and it worked. It's very interesting when we hone in and discover that we're whole people, and part of our wholeness is not only that on the inside we are both good and bad, flawed and fabulous, but we have this amazing vessel that we live in, this body, and there's a brain, body, emotional, psychological, spiritual connection. And there's nothing wrong with getting familiar with how your body helps to de-escalate your emotion. If you're open to the idea of running for your mental health, if you're open to the idea of lifting weights for a dopamine hit, for that burst of endorphins that's going to help you manage your life, and if you see the benefits in all these sort of ways that we use our body, tapping is really a very similar thing. It's not some sort of magical voodoo. It is pressure points, and it is us relying on our brains, hippocampus, where everything connects, and it is trying to help balance off the two hemispheres of our brain. Again, a neuroscientist can speak about those things. A neuropsychologist can tell you more efficiently about how the brain functions. I more see it in metaphor and pictures, because that's how it works for me to understand how my brain is working, and hopefully help my clients know to the best of their ability, or to the point where they trust me to let themselves discover ways to de-escalate intense, uncomfortable emotion. All right, you guys, I'm really glad you're here. This is a little bit of a depart from me talking about attachment and love energy and all those things these days. That's been my main focus. But in my internal world, I do a lot of coping with anxiety, and this is one of the ways that I cope. This is one of the things that I encourage clients to use, friends, family, and I wanted to expand on that little video that I did in the pandemic. I'm glad you guys are here. Thank you for checking this video out, and peace and love and self-regulation, baby.